vielleicht nur als Impulsant.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Race to Power with me, Ananya Datta. Here's what's coming up in the next 30 minutes. Kamala Harris has chosen Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. We decode what he brings to the table. Over 24 hours since Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled Bangladesh, we tell you where things stand right now as well as what's next for the country. Now, Kamala Harris kept the name of her running mate under wraps till the last moment. Just like Joe Biden did in 2020, just about an hour ago, reports came in that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has been chosen as her running mate. The 60-year-old was born and raised in a small town in Nebraska. The teacher-turned-politician has had an uncommon resume for a VP pick. He started his career as a teacher in China, then went on to become a high school teacher in Minnesota, where he was part of a faculty and stood for gay rights. That was in 1999, long before even the Democratic Party advocated for LGBTQ+ rights. He also served in the Army National Guard for 24 long years. Walz first ran for office in 2006. He supported unions and managed to flip a Republican-leaning congressional district. Then in 2018, he ran for governor and won, and has defended the seat successfully in 2022 as well. He is now the chair of the Democratic Governors Association and has been a national campaigner for Harris even before he was considered as a VP pick. Now, it will be a busy week from the word go, and the Democrats duo will kick off the tour to Battleground States, 7 states under 5 days, and it will start tonight from Pennsylvania. And Harris is expected to walk in with her vice presidential pick for the very first time, and that is Tim Walz. Reports say the name has been announced, as we know, and the duo will head to Michigan and Wisconsin after that. And these 3 states, along with Georgia and Arizona, are the same states Biden had flipped blue in the year 2020. Now, Harris is also expected to make stops in North Carolina, which Biden lost by a slim margin in 2020. And lastly comes Nevada, where Democrats won narrowly in 2020 elections. Now, in the latest, Republican nominee Donald Trump's team has slammed Walz as a left-wing radical. Unlike others, Harris did not have much time to choose her running mate. It seems like an eternity, we believe, but Biden quit the race just 2 weeks ago. Harris has chosen Walz, the governor of Minnesota. It is important to note here that Minnesota is not a swing state. The state has not elected a Republican since the year 1972. We told you about the looming fears of a recession in the United States, and Trump will weaponize the latest predictions of recession by Goldman Sachs. And can Kamala Harris and her running mate maintain the edge over lower and middle-income voters? We will have to wait and watch. All right, to take the story further, we are being joined by our correspondent, Susan Terani, live from New York. Susan, good to see you. Now, many polls before this showed that Josh Shapiro and Mark Kelly had higher possibility of favorability. I want to ask you, what do you think Kamala Harris saw in Tim Walz that probably Americans couldn't?
Well, Well, on the surface, from what we know, at least from the facts, is that Tim Walz is someone who's very safe with the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas movements here in the United States, and also a lot of the Muslim communities. Remember, he's from a state where Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is the congresswoman for the 5th District of Minnesota. They recently just took a picture together, and Ilhan Omar endorsed him. He's also very safe for Michigan as well. Those individuals who went out again, pro-Palestinian protesters. It appears that that's the camp that the Harris campaign wants to focus on. Josh Shapiro is Jewish. He was known to be a little bit more to the middle. So was Mark Kelly as well. And with Tim Walz, really the stage is set for this campaign a season to be very, very significant, because you cannot have two more different ideologies and candidates in the Republicans and the Democrats. Tim Walz recently in an interview said that don't shy away from your progressiveness. This is a direct quote. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. So, you can understand where his mindset is when it comes to politics and social issues. So much different from Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, of course.
Absolutely. And speaking about Donald Trump, we received a statement by Trump's campaign just a few moments ago where they called Walz a liberal extremist. How are Republicans seeing Kamala Harris's pick?
Yeah, jubilation. They are ecstatic. They're very happy. Someone like Josh Shapiro would have been very dangerous to compete against, because he would not only win Pennsylvania, but he's also won to the center. It would have been a lot harder for the Trump campaign to start attacking Shapiro, not only because he was Jewish, not only because he was to the center, but he's also from a swing state like Pennsylvania. So it's yet to be seen, how this is going to play out. It's not going to be easy for the Harris camp to defend Tim Walz. But on the other hand, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, they have their own concerns right now, as we're seeing the polls are so close to each other the next few days. And of course, after Kamala Harris appears with Tim Walz today in Philadelphia, I think a lot of the sentiments will become more clear than what we know so far.
Absolutely. It does seem like U.S. presidential race has just gotten more exciting. Thank you so much for joining us and getting us all those updates, Susan. Now, we are 3 months away from the U.S. presidential elections. Let's get you the latest polling from Morning Consult. We have to mention that these surveys were taken before Kamala Harris announced her VP pick. And the numbers show that Harris leads Trump by a record margin. It is 48% to 44%, giving Democrats the largest advantage over Trump in nearly a year. Now, Harris leads Trump by 5 points among independents, and this is something very interesting. The percentage of those wanting a different candidate has risen to 11%. With so much being said about age and mental acuity, Donald Trump is now the older candidate, and the latest poll shows that it is sticking with the voters. 71% say that Harris is in good health, compared to 52% of Trump. And when it comes to who is mentally fit to run the country, 64% say Harris and 48% say Trump. Half of the voters also say former President Donald Trump is quote-unquote too old. The number is similar to those saying the same in the 7 swing states, and that's something that could change the election. Shifting focus now, it has been more than 24 hours since Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled Bangladesh. She's in India, looking at Dhaka from afar. Hasina is not the only one. The world is monitoring what's happening in the country every single second. Here's where things stand at the moment. There is no government at place. Opposition parties are now working on an interim government. The president has dissolved the parliament, and the student protesters are still on the streets. Now, Dr. Devapriya Bhattacharya, an economist and public policy analyst from Dhaka, said that the next few hours are crucial for the country. My colleague Mohammad Salih spoke to him.
The new government is yet to take charge. There are challenges in putting that government together. There are very different types of forces now, currents and undercurrents. There are the forces and individuals who this is the hangover of the earlier regime, and the new regime is also could not take shape because there are high expectations from the youth movement, whereas there are also limitations on how do you run a statecraft. So we are at this moment in a serious power vacuum, and the more prolonged it gets, that the anarchy will continue in that way. So we'll have to give the next 24 hours and see how it takes shapes.
Yesterday, the army chief had urged the protesters to return home and also said that peace in Bangladesh is dependent on the students of the country. So far, the students have managed to get their demands heard. Sheikh Hasina has quit, a caretaker government has been promised, and a third demand is that Nobel winner Muhammad Yunus should lead the interim government. While Hasina is in India, living under heavy security just 30 kilometers from the capital city of New Delhi, her son, Sajib Wazid, has been speaking to the media, slamming the people of Bangladesh.
This is not a movement anymore. When police and civilians are being killed, houses being burnt, journalists murdered, this has turned into terror. And there is only one way to resist the terror. Could Bangladesh ever come this far without Sheikh Hasina? Nobody has ever imagined that Bangladesh would have such developments. Fair enough. What will happen to you after post-Sheikh Hasina regime? It is none of my concern, nor my family's anymore.
Now to take this story further, we are being joined by Zarif Fayaz, a journalist from Dhaka. Mr. Fayaz, thank you so much for joining us here on WION. Good to see you. Now, before I come to the politics, I have to ask you, how have the Dhaka streets been all day today?
Thank you for having me. Dhaka, as you know, that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had fled the country yesterday, and things were jubilant at first yesterday. People from all over Dhaka were on the streets marching towards her official residence, the parliament. But as she left, much of the crowd, including a lot of her own party people, were perhaps caught in a much degree of confusion. And in the wake of confusion, the police and the law enforcement agencies have also retreated from their stations, leaving the country completely without any protection of the law enforcement. We have seen rioting, we have seen mob violence. Many mobs have been targeting ex-party members, ex-Army League members, their houses, their offices. We've seen looting. There have been complete lawlessness in the country last night as well. But the good thing is, and the hopeful thing is, we have seen students, and many of the student protesters who were protesting for the resignation of the Prime Minister, they have taken to the streets today. They have tried to protect the houses of these people from looters. They have also taken it upon themselves to regulate the traffic on the streets. So we're hoping that things will get better.
All right, just moments back, we got a statement from Muhammad Yunus. I would quickly like to quote him. He has said, "I'm honored by the trust of the protesters who wish for me to lead the interim government. If needed, I will take it." How do you think the interim government will shape under Dr. Yunus?
It remains to be seen. It's a hopeful thing that Professor Yunus have agreed to the students' demands. But the students are right now meeting with the president at his official residence, as well as the army chief, to discuss how the government will shape up. We can only hope that this government, other members who will join this interim government, will be inclusive, and they will prioritize human rights, and they will be democratic.
All right, Mr. Fayaz, you make a fair point there. Thank you so much for joining us here on WION and getting us your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Let's focus to the United Kingdom now. The Labour Party is planning a major policy shift for housing asylum seekers. Instead of housing them in large military sites, it says that it will distribute migrants across various locations in the United Kingdom. Now, under the Conservative government strategy, hundreds of asylum seekers were put up in sites like in Essex and RAF Scrampton in Lincolnshire, and This was aimed at reducing the cost of housing the migrants in hotel. The Labour intends to substantially increase the procurement of dispersed accommodation to ease the strain on local services that large-scale sites impose. According to reports, the new approach will focus on using empty homes and former student blocks with self-catering facilities. RAF Weathershell started housing asylum seekers since last July, accommodating about 800 individuals. Recent reports, however, revealed harsh living conditions, including outbreaks of scabies, leading to legal actions against the Home Office. Similarly, RAF Scrampton has intended to house up to 800 people, which was reduced from 2,000. But these plans remain uncertain, in line with campaign promises, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer had committed to closing these sites. The new government also decided to stop using the Bibi Stockholm barge in Portland, Dorset, for migrant accommodation. The National Audit Office says that the Tory plans of using large-scale sites for asylum seekers was more costly than hotels. Local councils are now being encouraged to collaborate with central government to set targets for increased dispersed accommodations. Now, ahead of the German state elections, the grannies against the right are mobilizing in the country. With the far-right Alternative for Germany, also known as the AfD party, tipped to be the strongest party in the state parliament if it wins the September 1st elections in Thuringia and Saxony. The Grannies Against the Right movement is calling on people to come together to ward off the possibility. Several hundred demonstrators marched through the state capital of Thuringia on Saturday, and the first Grannies Against the Right groups were founded in Austria in 2017. And this was when the centre-right government of Sebastian Kurz entered into a coalition with the far-right Freedom Party of Austria. Germany soon had its branch in 2018. Since then, the movement has grown. It aims to show that right-wing ideas are not an alternative even for the older generation. Now, the movement now has around 30,000 active members and campaigns against racism, misogyny and anti-Semitism. In the year 2020, the Central Council of Jews in Germany awarded the Grannies Against the Right their Paul Spiegel Prize for civic courage. Let's focus now. A group of 5 secretaries of state from the United States has called on Elon Musk to address misinformation spread by the AI chatbot Grok on their social media platform X. In their letter to Musk, they have criticized Grok for providing inaccurate details about state ballot deadlines following President Joe Biden's withdrawal from the 2024 presidential race. The letter has been signed by the Secretaries of State of Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, Pennsylvania and Washington. Despite being limited to X's premium subscribers, Grok's false information about election dates was widely shared across various social media platforms, reaching millions of the users. The information also included references to Alabama, Indiana, Ohio and Texas, although these states' secretaries did not join in signing the letter. The officials have reported that Grok continued to spread the misinformation for 10 days before any corrections were made. The secretaries have urged Musk to take immediate action to correct Grok's errors and ensure the accuracy of voter information during this crucial election period. Additionally, they have recommended that Grok direct users to canivote.org, which is a voting information website run by the National Association of Secretaries of State. Grok was launched last year for premium users of X and was introduced by Musk as a rebellious AI capable of answering provocative questions that other AI systems typically reject. Social media platforms including X have come under increasing scrutiny for their role in spreading election misinformation. The secretaries have stressed that X has a responsibility to provide accurate voting information to US voters, especially in a major election year. Let's take a look at some other political stories making headlines. The third and last attempt to form a new government has failed in Bulgaria. This paves the way for snap parliamentary elections in the country. On July 29th, Bulgarian President Rumen Radev asked the smallest parliamentary group, the 16-seat There Is Such People party, to nominate a prime minister candidate and try to form a government. But the party failed to secure enough support. Earlier in July, the two largest parliamentary groups in the 240-member legislature, GERB UDF and We Continue to Change Democratic Bulgaria party, had failed to fulfill the task. A Tunisian court sentenced 4 potential presidential election candidates to 8 months in prison and banned them from running for office on a charge of vote buying. The opposition claims the move is aimed at excluding serious competitors of President Kais Saied. The opposition have accused authorities of using arbitrary restrictions and intimidation in order to ensure the re-election of Saied in a vote set for October 6th. The European Union says it does not recognize the proclaimed result of Venezuela's election. It charged the government in Caracas with failure to release the supporting voting records from polling stations. Incumbent President Nicolas Maduro was declared the victor in the July 28th vote in results published by the National Electoral Council of Venezuela. But the opposition party and many countries have criticized the declared outcome. An Algiers court placed 3 rejected presidential candidates under judicial supervision. 68 more people, including elected officials, were temporarily detained as part of an investigation into electoral fraud. They are suspected of being involved in signature sales for the upcoming presidential election on September 7th. Candidates are required to gather large numbers of them to be eligible to stand for the elections. All right, going back to the United States, we look at the jump in US recession risks, which caused a bloodbath in global markets. Until the Fed meeting on Wednesday last week, expectations were for the US Federal Reserve to lay the path for rate cuts in September. But data since then has reignited recession worries. Now the narrative on Fed rate cuts is not if and when, but by how much. Take a look at our next report to know more.
Monday saw an extension to the global stock market rout as investors fled to the safety of bonds. This is driven by fears that the Fed is lagging behind the curve in its policy support for the US economy's slowdown. Traders priced in additional interest rate hikes in Japan, sending the country's stock down violently. The Topix index marked its biggest 3-day drop since the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster, pushing the Japanese market into a bear market. A measure of Asian stocks fell to a 4-year low, reversing the gains made in 2024. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index entered a correction and wiped its gains for the year. The benchmark was down about 5% to mark its worst session since the early days of the pandemic in March 2020. This comes after US non-farm payrolls saw one of the worst prints since the pandemic. A carefully monitored recession signal was set off when the unemployment rate suddenly rose above the Fed's year-end prediction. Whenever the 3-month average of the unemployment rate rises by more than 0.5 percentage points over a 12-month period, we get a recession. This is based on the SARM rule. Everything was weak in the July jobs report. The more the US soft landing theory gets questioned, we could see further pullback in global stocks. Economists at Goldman Sachs raised the probability of a US recession in the next year to 25% from 15% penciled in previously. However, Goldman economists also said the risk of a recession is only limited. In September, November and December, Goldman anticipates a 25 basis point cut. Goldman's Fed projections are more conservative compared to Citigroup and JP Morgan Chase. In contrast, revised projections by JP Morgan and Citigroup show the Fed is likely to cut by 50 basis points in September. Whether these investment banks get it right or not, the market's plunge underscores the growing fear of recession. The sea of red in global markets also reflects that the Fed is already too late. So will we get a soft landing, or will the Fed's decision to leave rates on 2-decade highs result in a recession is to be seen. More importantly, investors will watch if the Fed's higher for longer rates rhetoric has done permanent damage to the economy. Business Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And with that, we're wrapping up this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching with me and Anya Datta. Goodbye.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at yowon.com.
Massive turning point in the West Asia conflict. Israel opens Iran war front. Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh killed in Tehran, a targeted attack during a visit to Iran for the new president's inauguration.